Hello and welcome to Medals and Mics with me, Derval and Rob.
With me, David Gillick.
Myself, Rob Heffernan.
This podcast looks inside the life of us trying to be our best on a global stage.
Like all great journeys, it didn't always go to plan, yet the lessons learned can be applied to everyday life.
Every week we'll talk about winning major medals, Olympic Games, new challenges, our sporting careers and everything in between. Enjoy listening.
Thanks for being here.
We hope you enjoy listening.
After the last day, lads, I was thinking, for every sports person, there comes a point where they have to move away from home and the comfort zone and the environment that they grew up in. After I went to my first Olympics, a whole new world opened up and you learn from the environments that you're in and you start piecing things together really quickly, and I felt I had to move away from where I was from. When did that point come for either of you?
Well, I'm looking at the picture up on the wall there, and I see a very young looking Derval O'Rourke. Silver medal in Gothenburg, Derval, was it?
Silver, European silver in that picture. I do look about 12 though, but I think I was 25 in it.
See, I look at that and I go 2006.
Yeah.
And that was probably the moment for me to realise I needed to make a change. Because I went to those championships and I had a level of success in the European indoors in 05 and I went to Gothenburg and I kind of was like, right, progression, get to a final, so top 8. So that would have been a step in the right direction.
Did you do that from Dublin?
I did all that from Dublin.
Okay. So why did you feel you needed to change?
I came last, and I'm talking paddy last, in a semi-final in Gothenburg.
Okay.
And the realisation of like having an element of expectation, a bit of pressure, and when I went to those championships, it all just fell apart. And I can remember looking around at all the other athletes, people that I'd beaten, but yet had made finals, and I kind of thought like, what am I doing? What am I doing? I was, I was about 22 at the time, so I kind of had this thing in my head, like, I want to maximise this at least at the age of 30. Where will I be at the age of 30 and be able to look back and go, I gave it a crack. And that was the moment for me to kind of, off the back of those championships, to go, I need to relocate, I need to move away. And it was no discredit to the lads I was training with at the time, but if I had a good day, I was finishing 10 metres ahead of lads. If I had a bad day, I was finishing 5 metres ahead of lads. I wasn't being challenged. I was still going out with my mates on maybe a Thursday night and waking up hungover on a Friday, student night. That was the life I was living, and I was able to run well off the back of it. But if I really wanted to crack on and make a European final, make a global final, go to the Olympic Games, I had to make a change. And that's when I decided to relocate over to Loughborough University.
And how did that come about?
So again, it was taking an element of ownership. I can vividly remember going back and for the first time ever debriefing, like actually sitting down with a pen and paper.
Organically doing it.
Yeah, just doing it myself and kind of going
own?
by myself. Yeah. I was devastated after Gothenburg. And like, I can remember coming back to Dublin Airport and landing in Dublin Airport, and I'd experienced all that when you land and they're all there to clap you home and well done and all that. And then on this occasion, you were getting it all. And it wasn't like I was jealous of you or anything.
But you felt you could have been a better version of yourself.
I did. I had that kind of belief that, I'd experienced all that, and now look at me now. I hadn't even made a final. I was so embarrassed. And even like through the mix zone, which we all know is a difficult place, when things don't go well, that mixed media zone, and I had to walk through that, and
it's only you. It's only you who know that feeling, and I think when you're honest with yourself.
When you kind of talk about like, that decision and why to relocate and the need to relocate, that was me, and I had to take ownership. I realised there and then that, what, I had a God-given talent. I had to use it, and I had to make some changes. And for me, like, Loughborough was an environment. It was an ecosystem, and I didn't know it when I first went there.
Who said it? Was the Spider-Man at the time? with great power comes great responsibility. So you have to nurture it. Yeah. And when did it happen for you, Derv?
Yeah, I'm listening and I'm trying to see what parts are similar. I think for me,
it's probably different as a sprinter because you have all the facilities really to do it in Ireland, don't you? Like, you don't necessarily in a lot of
but
cases,
it's different from individuals as well. Like I felt I needed a group. I needed people around me. I needed to be pushed every day. Not every athlete is like that. Some people can work really well as individuals.
I suppose where it brings me, right, is like where it's interesting, right, because you're talking about environment, but it's not really just about. I think environment is like the end point. I think the question before you get to that is like, where's your head at? So like, for me, you know, similar to you, like I grew up in Cork. The environment in Cork for athletics was good because Cork was good for sport. So I think in Cork, the expectations of like your level and where you can go is really high. Like genuinely, it is really, like, that's not just urban Cork people saying that. Like it is really high. And so like when we were growing up, Munster rugby were starting to do well. Like there was always a good tradition in Gas, Sonia obviously massive, Roy Keane, Dennis Irwin. And I knew that the environment and the structure for me in Cork would not work. Like, so, but that went back to my mindset. So my mindset was like, I was in Cork, I could have gone to college here, I could have been a big fish in a little pond in Cork, like, and that was, I think, the difference in that, like, I wanted to be a fish, any size fish in a global pond. And when I was in Cork, I couldn't ever break past a certain level. I really don't genuinely believe I could. So I decided to leave Cork as a teenager. Like I left kind of young, and really genuinely tough decision. Like never ever considered how tough it was, probably till I retired, and probably till I look back. All my friends, like.
So did you consider that decision at the time? Like was it a tough one to make? Or was it like going, no, I'm just doing this, I have to do this to be better?
There was no other option.
I gave myself no other option. Like I filled out my CAO form. I filled out my CAO form for college, and the only options I put down was Dublin. Every single option was Dublin. I didn't put one option down in Cork, and I had no idea how I was going to do it. I had no idea how I was going to fund it.
But were you at this time looking at it from...
Athletics, only athletics. I was trying to get to the Olympic Games. Yeah. So it was 2000, and I knew I had 4 years trying to get to the Olympic Games, and it was a decision. That life decision at the time was a completely athletics decision. Like, when did that
point happen though? When did you go, I need to get to an Olympic Games, I'm going to do whatever I can to get there? What was that defining moment?
I think being exposed to European level athletics when I was in fifth year school, and then going, this is the level, I'm not very good at this level, so how do I become good? And then you start to pare it back, and what's interesting, I think, about what Gilly is saying is like, it's sitting down on your own. Like, what age do you have to be to sit down on your own, take a bit of responsibility, a bit of accountability? Like, I would have sat down on my own and gone, okay, this is where I am, this is where I'm trying to get to, how do I start now? How do I start to draw the road? Like, how do I do that?
You were thinking like that at such a young age.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was thinking like that at that age, because, and you know, another reason, I know we've touched on it like in other episodes, because I could see in my friends were like really ambitious. Like, so like one of them wanted to be a doctor, another one was like, I'm going to be a solicitor. So to me, I was like, I would have felt I wasn't clever enough to do those things. So I was like, I don't think I'm clever enough to do those, but actually I wanted to pursue sport. So like, what's my easiest way? And I remember being in my leaving cert and looking up how many hours a week, you know, I think I've said that before, it was to do one course versus another course, because that meant I could train more. So like, that would be my first significant move, would have been leaving my parents' house. And like, the only way I can describe my relationship with my mom, both of you know my mom, is I and my mother is doty pet, right? So me deciding to leave and go to Dublin was a massive, like, it was like ripping the bandage off. Like, my mother went from driving me to every training session, cooking all my meals, doing everything for me. Like, I'd wake up in the morning and my mom did everything for me. To me, getting on a train, dragging a massive bag onto a train to Dublin and going to live in Dublin, like, it was massive. It was a massive move as a teenager, and it was a huge risk, because if it didn't work out, you're up in Dublin. I didn't know anybody in UCD. Like, I walked in the door going, hey, Billy, no mates. Like, it was hard. It was really, really hard. Like, so that was, yeah, to rip off the kind of, it was so cozy and comfortable in Cork. social scene was good. My buddies, everyone was telling me I was a great girl in athletics. But I needed to go somewhere I wasn't great. And I went from being the top of the tree to the bottom once I went up to Dublin. What was your first big transition?
They're similar, but it's still different. I remember when I raced in Sydney, like I always remember thinking when I was younger, whether I was running or walking, that knowing a man. Once you're out of junior, you're a man. And I was like,
grown up,
100 miles a week. Do 100 miles a week. And a lot of that, if you throw enough muck against the wall, a lot of it will stick. So that got me to Sydney. And then when I was out in Sydney, I finished 28, and it's similar to where I came home absolutely mortified. Like, I was embarrassed. Yeah.
Isn't that a funny word, though? Because you know those performances that are really hard, and you've said that embarrassed and mortified. I don't think people realise that that's the feeling. And that is the feeling. You know, I remember just feeling like when on the days where it wouldn't have gone to plan, you didn't actually, you're so embarrassed. It's I don't know how to describe it to people who haven't been in that world. It's like, you know, something that happened to you as a kid that you look back and you go, oh my God, I was so embarrassed, where you get like something happened. I don't know. Yeah,
it is. Because you know yourself intrinsically, you know, like, so I remember, like, for me, like, being out in Sydney, and I met Robert Korzeniowski at the closing ceremony, and we can all have our own hang-ups, and I always remember that I was taller than him, and it took that excuse away from me, because I had a chip on my shoulder for being small, and he won the double. And
so he was double Olympic
champion, and he won the Olympics before, and he was smaller than me, so I'm like going, there's no excuse here now. So I went away, I went back to Ireland, partied in Sydney, went wild.
What age are you?
22. Yeah. A young 22.
Yeah.
You know, and you take into account that I only hit puberty at about 17. Do you know what I mean? So I...
That's my favourite part of every time we talk about it.
I was young.
You hadn't hit puberty then.
But I came home and I wrote to him, and he... But I came back after the Olympics, like, trained really hard.
But would you, like, talk us through, you know, you're young fella, you've met an Olympic champion, and yet you're writing to him. Like,
did you want to be him, or did you want to be better than him?
Oh yeah, I wanted it, but in my head, like, I felt I was so fast, like, so quick. Like, I had, my VO2 max was over 80, that I had all of the attributes, and I seen your man in the flesh, and then my head is thinking, how can I get to that point? Yeah. Not sitting down like you and mapping it out, but kind of going, how can I do that? Yeah. How can I do that? And I wrote to him, and he invited me.
What did you say in the letter?
Dear Robert.
Just told him how much I admired him.
From Cork.
But I waited.
He had
a website, Dave, back then, when no one had email addresses. Like, so I worked as part-time in a store back then. So my email address was... The guy used to come up to the store, John Mull was his name, printing jerseys. Very funny fella. He'd come in and he'd call your random name, and he'd go, Plumsucker, how are you getting on? Do you know, or something silly. God. So my email address was plumsucker@yahoo.com, right? But you know, when you're a kid, and firstly...
You're so funny.
Hilarious, sure. She wrote to Robert in that, and he rang me on Valentine's night. It's very sinister now, looking back on it, like. Do you know what I mean? So... Long story short, anyway, I didn't think it was him. I thought it was Pierce O'Callaghan winding me up. And I was there, Pierce, come on now, but I know it's you. And he was like, no, this is Robert Korzeniowski, and I would like you to come to South Africa to train with me.
Wow.
But there was no kind of debrief and stuff. I was gone to South Africa because I got an opportunity to train with the best. And I was being coached by a guy at the time in Ireland, complete polar opposite personality to me. And I told him, and he didn't believe that he rang me.
Was happening.
So I jumped on a plane, no plan, but I knew that's where I had to be. And then I had to learn practically. So I went away and I trained with him. Went to the wrong place in Johannesburg. Went to Potchefstroom. He was up in Joburg. I changed my email address in the meantime, and he never got the correspondence. So we ended up anyway. Jamie Costin and Gillian O'Sullivan came along with me, and we trained with Robert. And the first week out there, I remember doing 128k. My next week was 168k, which I never... And then the third week I ended up in bed and antibiotics. And Robert used to come down and look in the room laughing at us, because he was planned and he was structured, and there was a reason for him to be there. And the big thing I always remember him saying, you know, Robbie, you know, you're very talented, but you need a plan. A good plan, a bad plan, any plan, but you need a plan. But I think that's grand, and I obviously was very, very structured and planned towards the end. But I think you need to throw yourself in there
and learn.
And there's ways in doing it, and there's different personalities to get to that point. but I don't think there's any substitute for physically seeing the champions, their mindset, how they behave every day, how they act, and it's like, how can I get to be that? And there's a lot of intelligence as well in ultimately getting to that point then as well, you know.
But there's a want there. Like, there's a want, and kind of
innately,
you
Dave, I
alluded
think,
to it as well, you know, and yourself. Like, you find a way, and I think this is a key thing, is like that mindset shift of like, okay, I want to get there. Yeah. What am I going to do? How am I going to do it? You bang on doors. You reflect on yourself.
Always,
like, I was very similar. I didn't have a plan. And people used to say, okay, like, you know, what do you want to do? I want to go to the Olympic Games. How are you going to do it? I didn't have a clue.
No.
You know, I didn't have a plan. I had no idea until after Gothenburg, 2006. Okay, it can't get much lower than this. I need to change something. And again, like, when I went over to England, straight away, it was that environment. It was, you know, that holistic approach to it. You know, I began sleeping better, eating better. I wanted to eat better.
Because that was just what's happening
anyway. That's just what they were doing.
That's what everyone was doing.
And it was also the big challenge. I knew, like I was training with people that were better than me. You know, and athletics is very, you know, it's black and white. You're running this or you're running that. You know, there was lads faster than me, and I knew if I wasn't going to show up with my A game every day.
Did you find going to England? Because I definitely found it when I went away training with the Poles, and I don't know, did you find it going from Cork to Dublin, that we were the laughing stock? The Irish we were just a joke. We weren't meant to do well.
I can remember being in South Africa, and I think by this stage I'd ran fast. I think I'd retained my European title and stuff like that, and we were on a bus because I used to kind of piggyback on some of the.
You had automatic respect, so when you went over there.
No, but this fella turned around to me and he was like, "Oh yeah, but sure, like you're Irish, like you're gonna get sent to the champs anyway." Yeah, and I nearly threw him off the bus.
Yeah.
Because I have to hit the same standards as everyone on this planet has to.
Yeah.
And just because I'm Irish doesn't make me any difference. You dickhead.
I suppose when I would have transitioned to say from Cork to getting into a more structured, like high performance environment, a big thing that happened to me at that stage.
So who was in Dublin when you went to Dublin? What was high performance about Dublin?
So high performance about Dublin was, there was a sprinting group. So I was a sprint hurdler, and I knew I had this target where I was like, I need to be the fastest sprinter in Ireland to be a really good sprint hurdler. And the fastest sprinter in Ireland was in that group in Dublin at the time. So I was like, I need to go and beat her. Like, I need to go train with her every day, and I need to be better than her to be a brilliant sprint hurdler. So that was the first thing. And it's funny you were saying facilities, like, you know, with sprinting, it massively matters. We live in a country where it rains a lot and where it's freezing cold, really hard to do speed work. There was an indoor strip. It wasn't heated. We used to be in there in like hats and gloves, but there was an indoor strip. It genuinely were like. But you know, a big thing I suppose when I went to Dublin, again, it's like back to your point, when I made that decision to leave my parents' house, it was almost like from the start of that train journey to getting off the train, I became an adult. So I had to manage my money. How much money did I have? Like, I became a scholarship athlete in UCD, so it's like, okay, how much will the scholarship pay for?
So did you have all of it? Because I had to get to that point, like, but I had to go stone broke before I had to figure it out. Were you conscious of all of?
I was always conscious of money.
Yeah,
I was always conscious of money because I suppose I would have grown up like where my dad is a really hard worker. He worked for Ford all his life, and it was like Cork in the 80s, you know, like, and I guess Ireland in the 80s where everyone was very conscious about people losing jobs, but like so you always knew that there's not this, you know, there's not like a safety net of money there. So I knew when I was going to Dublin, like, if I wasn't on scholarship, how do I live in Dublin if I'm not on scholarship? And so
but it's all performance.
It was all performance. So I suppose the financial side of it, of how do you fund this straight, and I would have been 18, 19. So how do I fund it? But interestingly, like, going into that environment, like, you're still within the same country, but it's all steps on the ladder. So like I went from maybe being on the lowest rung to I'm up a little bit more. But then what you guys are talking about, training camps, then it started to go that like I'd go to maybe 2 or 3 training camps a year. I would have gone to Poland on training camp, would have gone to Portugal. I went to South Africa, and again, like what you said, the Irish at that time were not taken seriously, like particularly in our events. Like, you were in endurance, so you were coming from an event where, like,
but we were a complete and utter show. Like,
one. So because at that time the walkers hadn't won medals, but like being a sprint hurdler, a skinny, freckly sprint hurdler from Cork, like, not even maybe was anyone taking you seriously. So there's that intimidation. There's that like environment part of it as well, where you kind of go, okay, you have to back yourself to get in the train and go to Dublin. And then you're getting on a plane and you're going to Portugal, right? And the German team is there. And the German team, first of all, they're all really tanned. So I was like, oh my God, they all look so lean and they look so ripped. And there's that whole body shape thing where, you know, they all looked so physically fit compared to us. Like when I left Cork, I couldn't lift a weight. And I was in an event that was a power event that you needed to be able to lift. Couldn't lift anything. So like, I remember seeing them and they'd come on the track and it felt to me they had it all sorted in terms of their structure and we were 20 years behind. Like that's genuinely how it felt. It felt like...
So who would you have gone away on camp with?
I would have just gone with my Dublin training group. Like, so the same Irish athletes. But this is what I always noticed, right? It's people and how people are different. So in that training group, when we would have gone away on camp, I would have looked around, right? And I would have always had, like, back to the saying, when you were saying, would you have planned things out? I always had a notebook and I'd be writing everything down. So I'd have my notebook on camp and I'd be there with my own Irish group, right? And then I would be looking at the Germans and I'd be writing down the drills they were doing. Okay, they turn up at this time, they take 42 minutes to warm up. Then they did this. So on our day off, I would be spying on everybody, like looking at what everybody was doing, seeing what were the difference between what I was doing, what they were doing. And I definitely had years, not months, years of that like intimidation where that imposter syndrome, it wasn't even a syndrome because I was an imposter in that world. I did not belong there. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't professional enough. And I had to become much, much more professional. And it would have taken me, you know, you were talking about Sydney. It would have taken me those 4 first years in Dublin, qualified for Athens, went to Athens and it was like going to Athens, my first Olympic Games was like bringing, what's that phrase? Like bringing a knife to a gunfight. That's what it was like. It genuinely was. I remember going there, looking around, looking at these women and they were women and going, you need to sit down again. And I sat down and I sat down straight after that, champs, pen and paper and like what you were talking about. What's the reality? And what's the delusion? What's the reality? Like, how good are you? The answer was not very good. How good could you be? You don't know. It wasn't that I thought I could be really good. It was like, I actually don't know because I'm not giving myself a chance. Like, I am bringing a knife to a gunfight.
But it's that ongoing reflection, I think, is kind of rings true that you're not the finished article. You have a place where you want to go, but getting there is the journey. But you have to reflect on each little step. And like when you go to Dublin, you realise, okay, that's a step. Where am I? You go to a international competition, a championship, and you realise I'm still way off where I need to go.
There's a self-honesty with it though, isn't there?
Self-awareness,
like when you go away, like in these camps, and I think when I look back, being away with it, and you're absorbing, like what you're on about, you're absorbing everything, and it makes you reflect more and more. What am I not doing right? And
sometimes it's the basics. Likewise,
it's basics.
When I went over to Loughborough, straight away I was like, the lads were just doing harder sessions. They were training harder.
They were just training harder.
They were just training harder and training more often, and they were consistent.
Yeah. It's very matter of fact.
That's when I was a bit like...
It's not emotional.
No.
Or it's not personal.
No, not at all. But even the simple things, they're in the gym and they're like, they're doing the basic things consistently. And
but do you find, and I find obviously after coming out the other side, now we've been retired, and I was back up in Guadix with my athletes the other week, and obviously I map out everything, and my Swedish guy just won the World Championships, and you're looking at them the way they live every day. Like, I could give that training plan and put it publicly. Yeah. Do you have the desire, the motivation and the want to actually do it?
That's the other talent.
And I was up there the other week, Dave, and I'm there, oh man, I put my family through hell, because you innately think everybody wants what I want. Yeah. Everyone has to be on my car, and it's only when you remove yourself, they're tough, hard decisions, but they're innate to you, so it doesn't feel like a sacrifice. It's a massive sacrifice if you don't want it, but if you want it, you'll do absolutely anything.
It's a choice when you want it. Yeah. I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
But, and it's something interesting that you've touched on, and I think about this, not everybody wants it, but I think you have people who have the physical talent, and they'll never ever do the level to match the physical talent in terms of training consistency. I hate using the word sacrifice because I don't think you're sacrificing. I think it's choice. You're making choices, and I think that's an interesting point. Like you could have 10 people in a training group, right? 10 with an opportunity to do something in the sport, and who's going to be the athlete who, like, there's 52 weeks in the year. At the moment there, I started thinking there was 56. Well, thank you. 52 weeks in the year, and the way it was my years used to be laid out is like, for 52 weeks of the year, I have to be committed for 48.
Yeah.
So I have 48 weeks in the year. So you go, can you do 48 weeks, 6 days a week?
6.
6, because I was a sprinter.
Yeah.
6
You need a
days.
day off,
You
Rob.
need a day off to recover.
You got to
Day
recover,
off every
absolutely.
week.
Adaptations and all that,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So
yeah.
but your day,
Every
but
week.
even your day off then, because that's a typical endurance athlete
Isn't
response,
it?
right?
Snob.
Yeah, snob. That's snob. Can I say that's
we could go into
sporting?
sports snobbery in another episode now.
That's sports snobbery right there. But I think it's the nuances for me. It's like, do you want? It's like almost like a monk's type lifestyle where you have to go, do I want to live like that? And I see it all the time. And like, the three of us are around athletes, after we've retired, and you're around different structures, different setups. And like it's like all these small decisions every day. Like, so you have to make decisions to put yourself in the environment. And then when you're in the environment, how do you conduct yourself in the environment? How do you conduct yourself? So you could take the two of you, right, could go into a training environment or a work environment, whatever it is, whether it's sport or not, any environment where you need to get to an outcome or a result, right? And you could cruise for 2 hours. You're still there. People can still see you, still going through the motions. Or you can do 2 hours that's totally considered. That is what I would say, that hyper focus for the 2 hours and the time that you're in it. And both of you on paper have done the same thing, but your result out of it versus your result out of it would be completely different. And that's something that I think I was good at certain points, is that my hyper focus when I was at training, what I was trying to get out of it. I knew what I was trying to get out of it. I knew why I was doing the session. I knew what I needed the outcomes to be. And that was it. Bam, bam, bam. There was no...
There
wasn't a lifestyle.
In any high performance, they're the non-negotiables. Like even being back out in the camp the other week with the lads, just reiterating, the guys who actually buy into the life and who are very professional and they know everything that they're about, which you should know by the time you get to Olympic level. Like, you shouldn't have coaches away and Olympic teams telling you what to do, put on your sunscreen, all that. They should have nothing to do, because you've gone through all of the tiers to be the real elite, and you leave guys alone. And you can have more fun, because you have to have more fun to recharge, to use that hyper focus for your training. But if you're going to be chatting around and you're worried about other people or worried about Instagram
or gossiping or talking,
do you know what I mean? Yeah. Did you find that at your best, Dave, at your very best, when you knew you had to be on the start line?
Well, if I was to think back,
what was your flow state? Which is the big...
flow state. There's a good one.
There's no noise.
Yeah.
You're very clear, you're very centred, and you're very present. I think when I look at... Even if I go back to like Beijing, when I was in Beijing, there was too much noise.
Yeah.
I remember going into the village and just there was so much going on.
And I can remember seeing it. I can remember...
It was just all over
chaos,
the place. Chaos.
Yeah.
Whereas... but there's also a control element that you have to take ownership of as well. Like I can remember some of my best championships, I went and I arrived by myself. I can remember going down to Birmingham. I got a taxi from Loughborough. It's about 40 minutes away to Birmingham. And I arrived in the day before as opposed to 2 days before. I was like, I'm going to control this a little bit. Likewise, going into World Champs, Berlin, flew in the day before.
Yeah.
Didn't want to hang around. So there's always a process. And that's the thing, when you go to whatever championship or whatever big thing you have in your life, you reflect and you go, what worked, what didn't work? How can I change that for future reference? And that was always something that I managed quite well. And that flow state was just, you hit on it there, like you have a bit of a laugh, you're relaxed.
But you're still in control.
Oh, you're very much in control
everything.
Of everything.
So, and I think as a senior Olympic athlete, like, and I'd even have it with my lads, when you go away, you can plan when you arrive, what you're going to do, when you get every single...
Yeah, but some people don't. Some people are always looking for someone else to do
So
that.
then in that case, right, which can be dangerous as well, because I know athletes historically some athletes have gone to championships and they've nailed the performance and they don't know how they've nailed it.
Yeah.
And it can end up being a disaster afterwards. So sometimes you can hit a performance by luck.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to hit it by...
But it goes back to that word consistency. Like, if you can hit your numbers on a consistent basis, well then your plan, your structure is solid.
It's solid. So the chances of you performing are always higher. It mightn't happen, but at least you've given yourself a chance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
It's interesting you'd say that, like, when you hit a performance, when you need to, it's back to, like, that whole phrase of, like, you can manage what you can measure. So, like, what are your measurements and what are your markers? So for me, and interesting, what Gillick's saying, like, there's so many roads now I could go down with this one because I've loads of thoughts about it. for me, right, and not everybody is the same, I could not hand over control and responsibility externally when it came to performance, right? That's shocking. Are you shocked? Are you shocked?
Not in one bit.
Right? So for me,
Would you be very hard to work with for your teammates?
How dare you?
Just a general question.
It depends on, but in athletics, you kind of, what are your teammates?
Would you have annoyed them?
Would I have annoyed my teammates?
Yeah.
That's very hurtful.
No, like if you were working within a group.
Oh, very hard when I was doing athletics. But that's why I think people don't understand. Like, I think your team when you're doing athletics is your actual coaching setup, and your coach, that's who your team is, even though we're all on the same Irish team.
And I'm not throwing that at you, it could be you, because I know I could have been a disaster.
Oh no,
like
very
if I went down, like I'd know what I'd want to do in the morning if there wasn't lads towing the line, or if we were up on kilometres
See,
and they slowed by 2 seconds.
I was probably slightly different. I actually
needed control.
I liked no, I did like an element of control, but I also liked having a core group of people with me. So from a coach to training partners, I liked that there was some figurehead there that was kind of like, right, here's the plan. And I'd buy into that plan. And like, if he said, you know, do X, Y, and Z, I would do X, Y, and Z. I would do it to a T. Like working with it with various kind of nutritionists and stuff over the years, I would do it. Like weigh out your porridge. I'd weigh out my porridge every single day.
Whereas,
I like that.
So we would have all had similar teams, right? And actually, I think we should do a whole episode on the team, because I think team is really important. But the difference you and I would have in that, and I think you'd be a bit like this as well, right? So Sean Terry, my coaches, they're absolutely amazing people. They would give me the training plan, like say the 4-week plan. If the 4-week plan was starting on the Monday, they would give it to me maybe Wednesday the week before. So I had time to read it, absorb it, and ask any questions I wanted to ask. So if they had said, say take your exam, if your coach had said do, I don't know, 10 200s, let's just throw it out, 10 200s, you'd say, I'm going to do 10 200s. Whereas I would say, oh, they want me to do 10 200s. Why do they want me to do 10 200s? Like, I'm happy to do it, but I always need to know the why.
Yeah.
And that comes, once I know the why, and then I'll trust it. So I always needed to work with people, and I needed to be within a small, tight-knit group that they were always happy to answer the why. It always felt like this back and forward relationship. And so for me, where championships were tricky and the Olympics became tricky for me, was that it got so much out of control. So that's where that became tricky for me. And, you know, and you're talking about your stuff, like, I guess my best Olympics was London, and I flew in 2 days before London. It wasn't really part of any of the stuff, and not because it's fact. Look, because not that you've hit a nerve about the team player thing, but I think it's more like I never didn't want to be a team player, but I couldn't perform at my highest if I handed over control of my full day leading into a major championship, because it was so hard for me to perform at a world-class level. It took so much out of me to be at that level, because I was only at that level once or twice a year, that if I gave my energy somewhere else, and if I was in trying to do, like, say if there was like a team meeting and they wanted to do some sort of team bonding exercise. Could think of nothing worse.
But that doesn't really happen at champs. I think, you know, I suppose we're all coming from individual events and individual kind of sports perspective. So you do control what works for you.
You do control, because
I think it's more like...
I think the more coming into the championship though, Dave, you know you're gone into the Lions and you don't really care about knowing.
No.
At the start of the year, I would play ball more.
Yeah.
When there's no pressure.
I think it's away from like the big stadiums and the big lights. That's when, for me, a team element was important for just the motivation. You know, have a bit of a laugh, have the crack.
Yeah, and that was I always had a laugh.
Yeah,
my
that's
small
really
team.
important.
Yeah.
You know, and I think sometimes people don't see that. You know, you see the championship, but you don't see the slog in the weeks and the months prior to it. Like, and that's for me was, as a 400 meter athlete, you know, it's tough. Training for 400s is tough, right? So you're getting scraped off the track. Yeah. You know, you need people around you.
Physically and mentally.
And that was important. Tough. That's probably something that I kind of felt that I wasn't getting at home. And, you know, again, that you kind of touched on as well, that big fish in small pond. I wanted to get to a level. I wanted to go to the big champs. I wanted to compete, you know. So I needed to be in an environment where I was feeding off all these athletes and being pushed every single day.
But a lot of it as well, like if you look at the team environment, and when I look back to say when I went to South Africa with Robert that time, I'm on a shoestring budget, I'm living off my Visa card. As towards the end, where I was doing okay and bringing in good money, even if I was working in the team, I can remember being in Fontramore in 2008 and Robert Korjanowski was coaching me, Paco, Ilya Markov, who were Olympic medalists and world champions. And I created my own team within the team because I was able to pay for it. So I got my own chalet out in the mountains. I brought over Liam O'Reilly, Ray Flynn, Marion, Cahill. So I had my own ecosystem going in within that. So then I could go in and out of the team and be that character for 2 hours, and use the boys because they were so strong. Didn't care anything about them. They were fit. But I would go in and I had that mentality, like when the team, like I'd, regardless of what was going on in Russia, I'd have created my own ecosystem in Russia. I'd have having Marion, Ray, Liam working there. But if I was in with the boys, to put me under pressure, how to deal with the really, really strong athletes. But I was smart enough to remove myself from it then and go back to my safe place. But that was all money. When I had no money, I couldn't do that. I was stuck with the team, and it was very mentally very strong when we go back to environment, and very tough. Like at the points, being away, like I can remember being away in camps in Poland or Fontramore or Africa, and nearly having breakdowns. Like I just longed for home, longed to be with people, and it was really, really tough. Did you experience any of that, Dave?
Yeah, I did. Like I went to America and got badly injured in America. I was living by myself. The group didn't socially mix. We turned up and we trained, and then we dispersed, and that was it. You know, living by myself away from home, it was mind-numbing. And
that happened to me.
And then you get injured, you know?
And it's interesting the effect that has, I think, on your body. I did that for a year. I went to the UK for a year.
Where, Dorf?
Bath. I went to Bath for a year.
Why did you go there?
Because I felt like, and sometimes you should be careful how you react to disappointment. I felt like I had become world champion and I had faltered the year after, I'd gotten injured, and I threw out the baby with the bathwater. I didn't look at what was good in the environment that I had. I just picked holes in what was bad or what I thought was bad. And I got advice at the time. We had a performance manager at the time who told me the best thing to do was getting a plane to England. Again, it's back to handing over control and your power of making decisions. I shouldn't have handed over control that time.
Yeah, but you were hurt.
I was hurt. I was really hurt. I was really hurt with how I was performing. And I was vulnerable to other people's opinions, that actually those opinions, because you can't, you know, opinions are like arseholes, everyone has one. Like,
definitely,
you can't be.
But that's a reaction. Like
I reacted.
That was a rebound almost. Kind of, I need to do something. I was the exact same.
And I remember because you were in Loughborough and I was down in Bath, and I remember, this is so sad. Do you remember that? Is it Westlife song? I Want to Go Home. I drive around my car in Bath playing it. Another lonely day. And it's all like, they played it from like when they were on the road, and I was like, I just want to go home. And it was, I didn't perform well.
It's very hard to train when you're miserable as well.
I was miserable, but that's the funny thing when you're talking about environment. I think it depends on your age, it depends on your financial, so through your career, it depends on your age, it depends on your financial status or what you can put into it, and it depends on emotionally where you are. So age, finance, emotion. So age, I think when you're young, starting off, I think go into the lion's den, completely expose yourself, swim, you know, go into the deep end and learn to swim. Then I think you get a bit older, and you also have no money at that age for most athletes, right? So you have to start figuring out your finances a bit. Then you get a bit older, and it's like figure out what actually works for you and who you are as a person. And then that emotional support becomes really important. And I had no emotional support, and I drove that, and I fell apart. Like you, I got a stress fracture in my foot, a major serious issue, could have ended my career. But again, you come through it and you sit down and you get out the pen and paper and you go, where do we go next? What do we do? You know, and there's always somewhere to go and something to do.
So should we be telling athletes now that it's, why bother?
No, definitely bother. But I just think that responsibility, owning your decisions.
Yeah, there's layers. It's Pandora's box, isn't it?
Yeah, but
when you go into that environment, the doors just keep opening.
They do, but there's a willingness to open the doors as well and bang on the doors. And I think, you know,
curiosity.
Even curiosity and realizing that, okay, you know, who's available that I can actually extract from, you know. And you mentioned your people that you dipped in, dipped out. I was exact same. You go to England, okay, works. Who are the people around me that I can leverage, you know? And there is that awareness of like, you have to get out for air now and again as well. And that rest, recovery, knowing, you know,
but I think a lot of it comes down to, and I think we could chat more about that, is having the finances, the support, what your structure and your system is. and then like having the ideal plan for you to get to the Olympic Games or the championship in the best physical and mental shape, as opposed to when you're reactive when you're younger and you're going to places, you're like, oh, I'm training with Dave Gillick today and jumping over hurdles with Derv, and you're just, it's all, your energy is everywhere.
But it's, and we reference the Olympics a lot because that's, you know, that's a big chunk of where our lives came through. But it's no matter where you're trying to, no matter what the point is you're trying to get to, like whether it's Olympics, whether it's like you want to do better at work, you want a promotion, it's what are all the little bits that are around it that you have to figure out the landscape, and who are you within the landscape, like who are you emotionally, like who I was emotionally on my third Olympics versus who I was emotionally at my first Olympics. It was like dealing with a different person because you've grown, you've taken on some hurt in those years and you need to be minded in some ways, and then in other ways you don't need to be minded. Like when I was at my first Olympics in my early 20s, emotionally I was actually quite bulletproof. Throw anything at me, it didn't matter, I'd come back, I hadn't had too much hurt and pain. But you get hurt and pain for when things don't go well, and then you go, right, now how do I manage myself, and who do I need to protect me a little bit for when I go out there, because it's such a high level when you go out there that you need to go out there bulletproof. But you can't be bulletproof all the time.
I think we should
talk about it the next day.
Yeah, chat about like our real darkest days. And normalise them.
Smile, friend.
Okay. We have to show a bit of light at the end.
The highs, we have plenty of lows.
And then we give.
But I think, okay, next day we'll talk about the low.
As I think more people go through bad times.
Yeah.
The lows and the bounce back.
And for anyone listening or watching, you let us know. Maybe there's things that you'd like to hear from us as well. But I definitely think we have failures that we learn from, and that's what gives us a lot of strength. So will we go there next?
Yeah,
that's enough for today.
Good luck, lads.